The thunder rolled across the Colorado plains like the rumble of a freight train, and 17-year-old Emma Chen pressed herself deeper into the corner of the hayloft, her arms wrapped protectively around two trembling foals. Lightning split the darkness outside the old barn, illuminating her tear-streaked face for just a moment before plunging everything back into shadow. The twin colts, barely 3 days old, nuzzled against her with desperate trust, their soft whinnies mixing with the storm's fury overhead. Emma had been hiding in this abandoned barn for 2 days now, ever since she'd discovered the mare collapsed in the field during her final moments of labor. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The beautiful chestnut had died shortly after delivering her twins, leaving Emma with 2 fragile lives that depended entirely on her care. She'd managed to get them nursing from a bottle she'd fashioned from supplies in her backpack, but she knew this couldn't last forever. The foals needed proper care, warmth, and nutrition she simply couldn't provide alone. But going back wasn't an option. Not after what had happened at the foster home. Not after the things Mr. Davidson had tried to do when his wife was away. Emma shuddered at the memory, pulling the foals closer. She'd rather face starvation in this crumbling barn than return to that house of horrors. At least here, she was free. At least here, she could protect these innocent creatures the way no one had ever protected her. The barn door creaked open below, and Emma's heart nearly stopped. Heavy footsteps echoed across the wooden floor, accompanied by the soft jingle of spurs. She held her breath, praying whoever it was would leave quickly. The foals seemed to sense her fear and pressed closer, their warm bodies providing the only comfort she'd known in days. Someone moving around, clearly searching for something. She closed her eyes and tried to make herself invisible. But one of the foals chose that moment to let out a plaintive whinny that seemed to echo through the entire barn. The movement below ceased instantly. "Well now," came a deep voice, tinged with curiosity rather than anger. "That's interesting. This old place has been empty for months." Emma bit her lips so hard she tasted blood. The voice belonged to a man, probably middle-aged, judging by its gravelly texture. She'd learned to be wary of men over the past few years, especially since entering the foster system. They always wanted something, always had expectations that made her skin crawl. "I know someone's up there," the voice continued, gentler now. "And unless I'm much mistaken, you've got company that needs help." Another whinny from the second foal made further hiding impossible. Emma heard the man climb the ladder to the loft, his movements slow and deliberate, clearly trying not to startle her. When his head appeared above the floor level, she got her first look at him. He was older than she'd expected, maybe in his 50s, with silver threading through dark brown hair beneath a worn cowboy hat. His face was weathered by years of sun and wind, with deep lines around kind blue eyes that reminded her of her grandfather before he'd passed away 5 years ago. Unlike the predatory men from her recent past, this stranger's gaze held only concern and genuine worry. "Easy there," he said softly, as if speaking to a spooked horse. "I'm not going to hurt you, child. My name's Jake Morrison, and I own the ranch next door. Been looking for 2 missing foals for the better part of 3 days now." Emma's grip tightened on the colts. These were his horses. That meant he'd take them away, and she'd be alone again. The thought filled her with desperate panic. "Please," she whispered, finding her voice for the first time in days. "Please don't take them. I've been taking care of them. I found their mama in the field, and she was already gone, and they needed someone, and I know how to feed them and keep them warm, and—" "Whoa there," Jake interrupted gently, holding up a weathered hand. "Nobody's taking anything from anybody just yet. Mind if I come up? These old bones don't much like hanging halfway up a ladder." Emma nodded reluctantly, and Jake hauled himself into the loft with a grunt. Up close, she could see the genuine concern in his eyes as he took in her appearance. She must look terrible, she realized. Her clothes were filthy from days of living rough, her long black hair tangled with hay and dirt. The foals, in contrast, looked remarkably healthy for orphans, their coats glossy and their eyes bright. "You've done a fine job with them," Jake observed, settling cross-legged on the hay several feet away, clearly trying not to crowd her. Better than fine, actually. Most people wouldn't know the first thing about caring for newborn foals. My grandfather taught me, Emma said quietly. Before he died, he had horses on his farm in Wyoming. I used to spend summers there when I was little. Jake nodded thoughtfully. These are my foals, that's true enough. Their mama was Rosie, sweetest mare I ever owned. Found her 3 days ago, and it near broke my heart. Been searching everywhere for her babies, figured they'd died too. His eyes softened as he looked at the twins. You saved their lives, young lady. That's no small thing. Emma felt tears threatening again. Does that mean you're taking them now? Well, that depends, Jake said slowly. They're still pretty young to be separated from whoever's been mothering them, and you seem to have taken on that job right proper. He studied her carefully. Question is, what's a girl your age doing living rough in an abandoned barn? Where's your family? The question Emma had been dreading. She looked down at the foals, gathering courage from their trusting presence. I don't have family. Not anymore. I was in foster care, but... She trailed off, unable to voice the shameful details. Jake's expression darkened with understanding. Someone hurt you. It wasn't a question, and Emma found herself nodding before she could stop herself. The kindness in his voice was almost harder to bear than cruelty would have been. I see. Jake's jaw tightened, but when he spoke again, his voice remained gentle. Well, that explains why you're here instead of somewhere safe. But this old barn's no place for a young woman to be living, especially with winter coming on. Emma's heart sank. Here it came. The part where he'd call the authorities, send her back to the system, probably to an even worse situation than before. Please don't call the police, she begged. Please. I'll disappear, I promise. Just let me say goodbye to them first. Hold on now, Jake said, raising both hands. Nobody said anything about police. I'm thinking there might be another solution here. Emma looked up at him suspiciously. In her experience, adults who claimed to have solutions usually had ulterior motives. Jake seemed to read her thoughts. I live alone on my ranch, have for the past 8 years since my wife passed. It's a big place, probably too big for just one old cowboy. And these foals are going to need round-the-clock care for at least another month. He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. I could use help with them. And with the other horses. It's honest work, and there's a small cabin on the property that nobody's using. Emma stared at him, afraid to hope. You'd let me stay? Take care of them? If they'll let you, Jake said with a slight smile. Horses are good judges of character. If these little ones trust you enough to follow you, that tells me everything I need to know about the kind of person you are. As if summoned by his words, both foals struggled to their feet and moved closer to Emma, nuzzling her hands and pockets in search of the bottles she'd been feeding them. She couldn't help but smile as she stroked their soft necks. They're beautiful, she murmured. I've been calling them Thunder and Lightning because they were born during the storm. Jake chuckled. Good names. Storm babies are usually strong ones. He grew serious again. But I need you to understand something, Emma. This wouldn't be charity. I'd expect real work in return for room and board. My horses require daily care, rain or shine. It's hard work, and it starts before dawn. I'm not afraid of hard work, Emma said quickly, and I love horses. They're easier to understand than people. That they are, Jake agreed. Horses don't lie to you or pretend to be something they're not. What you see is what you get. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. He stood up slowly, brushing hay from his jeans. Why don't we get these babies back to my place where they can be warm and properly fed? You can see the setup, and if it feels right to you, we can talk terms. Emma hesitated. Every instinct told her to be wary, that this was too good to be true. But as she looked into Jake's honest face and felt the trust radiating from the foals, something inside her began to hope. What if... She started, then stopped. What if... What? What if I'm not good enough? What if I mess up? Jake's expression softened. Child, you've kept 2 orphaned foals alive for 3 days with nothing but determination and improvised supplies. I'd say you've already proven yourself. He extended a weathered hand toward her. But the choice is yours. I won't force you to come, and I won't stop you from leaving if you change your mind." Emma looked at his outstretched hand, then at the Foals who were watching her with those impossibly trusting eyes. Slowly, she reached out and took Jake's hand. His grip was firm and warm, calloused from years of honest work. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll try." "That's all any of us can do," Jake said. "Now, let's get these babies home before the storm gets worse." The trip to Jake's ranch was a careful procession through the rain. He'd backed his truck up to the barn, and they'd coaxed the Foals into a trailer lined with soft blankets. Emma rode in the cab with Jake, nervously fidgeting with the backpack that contained all her worldly possessions. "Tell me about your grandfather's farm," Jake said as they drove through the storm, clearly trying to put her at ease. Emma found herself relaxing as she talked about the summers she'd spent in Wyoming, learning to ride and care for horses under her grandfather's patient guidance. Those had been the happiest times of her life, before her parents' deaths in a car accident when she was 12, before the foster homes and the gradual erosion of hope. "He sounds like a good man," Jake observed when she finished. "He'd be proud of what you did for these foals." Emma felt tears prick her eyes again. "I hope so. I miss him every day." "The good ones stay with us even after they're gone," Jake said quietly. "We carry them in the way we treat others, in the kindness we show to creatures that need our help." They turned through a gate marked with a simple wooden sign, Morrison Ranch. The headlights illuminated a neat farmhouse with a wraparound porch, surrounded by well-maintained outbuildings. Even in the storm, Emma could see this was a working ranch, not some weekend hobby farm. "There's the main house," Jake pointed through the windshield. "Barn's behind it, and your cabin would be that little building over there by the creek. It's small, but it's got running water and electricity. Heat, too, which you'll appreciate come winter." Emma stared at the cabin, hardly daring to believe it could be hers. It looked like something from a fairy tale, with flower boxes under the windows and a small porch with a rocking chair. They unloaded the foals into a spacious stall in the barn, where Jake had already prepared a warm, dry space with fresh hay and blankets. The twins immediately began exploring their new surroundings, their energy returning now that they were out of the cold rain. "They'll need feeding again in about 2 hours," Emma said, automatically falling into caretaker mode. "And Thunder has been favoring his left front leg a little. It might just be from the uneven ground in the old barn, but—" "Good eye," Jake interrupted approvingly. "I'll take a look at it in the morning when the light's better. For now, let's get you settled." The cabin was even more charming inside than out. It was small but perfectly appointed, with a kitchenette, a cozy sitting area with a stone fireplace, and a bedroom with a bed that looked impossibly luxurious after nights on hay bales. "Mrs. Patterson from town comes by twice a week to clean the main house," Jake explained, setting Emma's backpack on the kitchen table. "She's been keeping this place ready too, just in case. There's food in the refrigerator, towels in the bathroom, and clothes in the dresser that might fit you. Previous owner's daughter left them behind when she went off to college." Emma looked around in wonder. "I can't believe this is real." "It's real," Jake assured her. "And it's yours as long as you want it to be. But right now, you look ready to drop. Why don't you get cleaned up and get some rest?" "I'll check on the foals during the night." "I should be the one checking on them," Emma protested. "They're used to me." Jake smiled. "They are, and that's wonderful, but you've been running on empty for days. One night of proper sleep won't hurt anything, and it'll make you better able to care for them tomorrow." Reluctantly, Emma agreed. After Jake left, she stood in the middle of the cabin, hardly able to process the change in her circumstances. Just that morning she'd been desperate and alone, hiding in a freezing barn with 2 helpless foals. Now she had a warm, safe place to live, and the promise of meaningful work caring for the animals she loved. The hot shower was a revelation after days of cold and dirt. She found clothes that fit reasonably well and fell into the soft bed with a sigh of relief. But even as exhaustion pulled her toward sleep, part of her remained alert, waiting for the catch. The moment when this dream would reveal itself to be too good to be true. When she woke the next morning, sunlight was streaming through the cabin windows, and the storm had passed, leaving the world washed clean and bright. Emma dressed quickly and hurried to the barn, worried that she'd overslept and neglected her duties. She found Jake in the Foals' stall, gently examining Thunder's leg while Lightning nuzzled his shoulder. Both babies looked alert and healthy, and Thunder was putting full weight on the leg that had worried Emma the night before. "Just a minor strain," Jake reported, looking up as Emma approached. "Nothing that won't heal with time and careful attention. You were right to notice it, though. Shows you've got good instincts." Emma felt a warm glow of pride at his approval. "How were they during the night?" "Restless at first, probably missing you, but they settled down fine. Lightning here tried to eat my hat, so I'd say they're feeling right at home." Emma laughed, the sound surprising her. She couldn't remember the last time she'd found anything genuinely funny. "He did that to me too. I think he likes the taste of leather." "Or maybe he's just curious about everything," Jake suggested. "Smart horses usually are." They spent the morning establishing routines. Jake showed Emma around the ranch, introducing her to his other horses: 6 mares, 2 geldings, and an ancient stallion named Ranger who ruled the pasture with benevolent authority. Each horse had its own personality and needs, and Emma found herself absorbing information like a sponge. "You really do have a way with them," Jake observed as Emma successfully approached a notoriously skittish mare named Whisper. The horse, who usually shied away from strangers, allowed Emma to stroke her neck and examine her hooves. "They can tell when someone genuinely cares about them," Emma replied, running her hands down Whisper's legs to check for heat or swelling. "Animals are honest. They respond to what's real." Jake nodded approvingly. "That's exactly right. And speaking of being real, I think it's time we had an honest conversation about your situation." Emma's stomach clenched with familiar anxiety. Here it came: the conditions, the expectations, the price she'd have to pay for this sanctuary. Jake seemed to sense her tension. "Relax, child. I'm not about to spring anything unpleasant on you. But if you're going to stay here, even temporarily, there are some things we need to discuss." They walked back to the house, where Jake poured coffee for himself and hot chocolate for Emma. The kitchen was warm and welcoming, with worn wooden cabinets and a large table that spoke of countless family meals. "First thing," Jake began, settling into a chair across from her, "I need to know more about your legal situation. Are you officially missing? Will anyone be looking for you?" Emma stared into her hot chocolate. "The foster family might report me gone, but probably not for a while. Mr. Davidson will want to avoid questions about why I left." She looked up at Jake, gauging his reaction. "And I'm 17. In 6 months, I'll be 18 and free to make my own choices." Jake nodded thoughtfully. 6 months isn't very long in the grand scheme of things. Question is, what do you want to do with your life after that? It was a question no adult had ever asked her before. Emma found herself thinking seriously about it for the first time in years. "I've always loved animals," she said slowly. "Horses especially, but all animals, really. I used to think about being a veterinarian, but that would require college, and I don't have money for that." "There are other ways to work with animals," Jake pointed out. "Horse training, ranch management, breeding programs. And there are scholarships for students who really want to learn." Emma felt a flicker of hope. "Do you really think that's possible? For someone like me?" "Someone like you?" Jake raised an eyebrow. "You mean someone who's already proven she can keep 2 orphaned foals alive against long odds? Someone who can calm a nervous horse just by being present? Someone who notices when an animal is favoring a leg before anyone else does?" Emma felt heat rise in her cheeks. She wasn't used to praise, especially not for things that came naturally to her. "What I'm proposing," Jake continued, "is a trial period. 6 months, through the winter and into spring. You help me with the horses, learn everything I can teach you about ranch management and horse care. In return, you get room, board, and a small salary that you can save toward your future plans." "What about the authorities? What if someone comes looking?" Jake's expression grew serious. "If anyone official comes around asking questions, we'll deal with it honestly. You're not a runaway in the traditional sense. You left a dangerous situation to protect yourself. Any reasonable person would understand that." Emma felt tears threatening again, but this time they were tears of relief rather than despair. Why are you doing this for me? You don't even know me." Jake was quiet for a long moment, staring out the kitchen window toward the pastures where his horses grazed in the morning sun. "I guess you could say I know something about starting over," he said finally. "About finding yourself in a place you never expected to be, having to rebuild from nothing." He looked back at Emma. "My wife and I, we always hoped to have children. Never worked out for us, and by the time we started looking into adoption, she got sick. Cancer." Emma felt her heart clench with sympathy. "I'm sorry." "She fought it for 3 years," Jake continued. "Brave woman. Never complained, never gave up hope. But in the end..." He shrugged. "After she passed, this place felt too big, too empty. I've been rattling around here alone ever since, wondering what the point of it all was." He smiled at Emma, but she could see the lingering sadness in his eyes. "Then yesterday I found a young woman risking everything to save 2 helpless foals. Reminded me that there's still good in the world, still people worth helping." Emma wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll give it a try," Jake suggested. 6 months. We'll both know by then if this arrangement works for everyone involved." Emma looked around the warm kitchen, thought about the cozy cabin that could be her home, imagined mornings spent caring for horses who trusted her completely. For the first time in years, she could envision a future that didn't involve fear or uncertainty. "Yes," she said, her voice stronger than it had been in days. "Yes, I'll try." Jake's face lit up with genuine pleasure. "Well then, I guess we'd better get started. Those foals won't raise themselves, and winter's coming on fast. Lots to learn before the snow flies." As they walked back toward the barn together, Emma felt something she'd almost forgotten existed. Hope. Not the desperate, fragile hope of someone with no options, but the steady, growing hope of someone who had found their place in the world. Thunder and lightning were waiting for them in their stall, heads poking over the door, eyes bright with curiosity about their new surroundings. When they saw Emma approaching, both foals whinnied in recognition and pressed against the stall door, clearly eager for attention. "Look at that," Jake observed with satisfaction. "They remember you. That's the beginning of real trust." Emma stroked both young horses, marveling at how much her life had changed in less than 24 hours. Yesterday she'd been hiding in an abandoned barn, terrified and alone. Today she had a home, meaningful work, and 2 beautiful creatures who depended on her care. "Stay," she whispered to the foals, echoing Jake's offer from the night before. "If they're gentle like Mama." The foals nickered softly in response, as if understanding not just her words, but the promise they contained. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, the orphaned girl and the orphaned horses, finding family in the most unexpected of places. And somewhere in the back of her mind, Emma began to believe that maybe, just maybe, her grandfather was watching over her after all, guiding her toward the place where she truly belonged. The weeks that followed established a rhythm that felt both foreign and comforting to Emma. Each morning began before sunrise, when she would slip from the warmth of her cabin into the crisp autumn air, her breath forming small clouds as she made her way to the barn. The foals had grown accustomed to her schedule, and their eager whinnies would greet her arrival, their small hooves dancing with excitement as they anticipated their morning feeding. Thunder had recovered completely from his slight lameness, and both colts were thriving under Emma's devoted care. They had nearly doubled in size since that first stormy night, their legs growing stronger and their personalities becoming more distinct with each passing day. Thunder was the more adventurous of the two, always the first to investigate new sounds or objects, while Lightning preferred to observe carefully before committing to action. Jake had been true to his word about the work being demanding. Emma's days were filled with feeding schedules, stall cleaning, pasture maintenance, and countless other tasks that kept a ranch running smoothly. Her hands, once soft from years of indoor living, had developed calluses that matched the satisfaction she felt in earning her keep through honest labor. "You're a natural at this," Jake observed one morning as Emma expertly guided a skittish yearling through its first experience with a halter. The young horse, a spirited bay named Copper, had been resistant to training until Emma began working with him. Under her patient guidance, he was learning to trust human contact. Emma felt the familiar warmth of pride at Jake's approval. Over the weeks, she had come to value his opinion more than she cared to admit. Unlike the adults in her past who had offered empty praise or criticism, Jake's words carried weight because they were earned through demonstrated competence. Copper just needed someone to listen to what he was trying to communicate, Emma replied, stroking the yearling's neck as he stood calmly beside her. He was scared, not stubborn. There's a difference. Jake nodded approvingly. Most people don't understand that distinction. They see resistance and think it needs to be broken down with force. It takes wisdom to recognize fear for what it is. The observation carried deeper implications that neither of them addressed directly, but Emma felt understood in a way that went beyond horse training. Jake seemed to recognize that her own past resistance to adult authority had been rooted in legitimate fear rather than mere rebelliousness. As October deepened into November, Emma's world expanded beyond the immediate needs of daily ranch work. Jake began teaching her about the business side of horse breeding, explaining bloodlines and genetic considerations that influenced breeding decisions. He showed her how to read the subtle signs that indicated a mare was ready for breeding, how to maintain health records, and how to evaluate potential buyers who came looking for quality horses. Knowledge is what separates a good horse person from someone who just likes being around horses, Jake explained one afternoon as they reviewed breeding records in his office. Understanding genetics, nutrition, training psychology, basic veterinary care, all of that makes you valuable to an operation. Emma absorbed every piece of information with the intensity of someone who knew education was her pathway to independence. She had begun keeping her own notebook, documenting everything she learned about each horse's temperament, health history, and training progress. Jake had noticed her dedication and started lending her books from his extensive collection on equine science and ranch management. The transformation in Emma's confidence was gradual, but unmistakable. Where once she had moved through the world with the cautious vigilance of someone expecting danger, she now carried herself with the quiet assurance of someone who knew her place and purpose. The horses responded to this change, becoming more relaxed and cooperative under her handling. One particularly memorable morning, Emma was working with a mare named Sage, who had recently given birth to her first foal. The young mother was protective and suspicious of human contact, especially when anyone approached her baby. Previous attempts to handle the foal had resulted in the mare becoming increasingly agitated, pawing and positioning herself defensively between her offspring and any perceived threat. Emma approached the situation differently. Instead of trying to separate mother and baby, she spent time simply being present in their space, sitting quietly in the corner of the paddock, while reading one of Jake's veterinary texts. She spoke softly to both horses, narrating her activities in a calm, conversational tone that gradually accustomed them to her voice. "I need to check your baby's hooves today, Sage," Emma explained to the mare, as if carrying on a normal conversation. "I know you want to keep him safe, and that's exactly what a good mama should do. But part of keeping him safe means making sure he's healthy, and I can help with that." Jake watched from outside the fence as Emma slowly gained the mare's trust through patience and respect rather than force. When she finally approached the foal, Sage remained calm, sensing that Emma posed no threat to her offspring. The examination proceeded smoothly, with Emma checking the young horse's eyes, mouth, and hooves, while maintaining a steady stream of reassuring conversation with both animals. "That was beautifully done," Jake said afterward as they walked back toward the barn. "Most people would have tried to halter the mare and force compliance. Your approach got better results with less stress for everyone involved." Emma felt the praise settle into a deep place of satisfaction she hadn't known existed. It just made sense to respect what she was feeling. She's a first-time mother, and she's programmed to protect her baby. Working with that instinct instead of against it seemed more logical. Logical and compassionate, Jake agreed. That combination will take you far in this business. As autumn progressed toward winter, Emma's relationship with Jake evolved from employer and employee to something more complex and meaningful. Their evening conversations over dinner became longer and more personal, moving beyond immediate ranch concerns to deeper topics that revealed their respective philosophies and experiences. One night, as they sat by the fireplace in Jake's living room reviewing plans for winter feeding schedules, Jake shared more about his marriage and the dreams he and his wife had harbored for their future. "Margaret always said this place was too beautiful not to be filled with the sound of children's laughter," Jake said, staring into the dancing flames. "We had names picked out, a nursery all planned. When the doctors told us it wasn't going to happen naturally, we started the adoption process. But then Margaret got sick, and everything else took a backseat to fighting the cancer. Emma set down her hot chocolate and studied Jake's profile in the firelight. Do you ever regret not trying adoption after she passed? Jake considered the question carefully. I thought about it. But I was grieving, angry, not in any shape to be responsible for a child's well-being. And as time went on, I convinced myself I was too old, too set in my ways. He looked at Emma with a slight smile. Funny how life has a way of bringing you what you need when you're finally ready to receive it. The implication hung between them, unspoken but acknowledged. Emma had become more than just hired help. She was filling a void in Jake's life that he hadn't fully recognized until she arrived. What about you? Jake asked gently. Do you ever think about having a family of your own someday? Emma felt her chest tighten with familiar anxiety. Family had become a loaded concept for her, associated more with disappointment and danger than love and security. I don't know if I'd be any good at it, she admitted. I don't have great examples to draw from. You have excellent examples, Jake countered. Look at how you care for those foals, how you've connected with every horse on this ranch. Love and dedication like that don't come from nowhere. Emma thought about her grandfather, about the summers when she had felt genuinely cherished and valued. Perhaps those memories could serve as a foundation for something better than the failures that had followed. My grandfather used to say that family isn't just about blood, Emma said slowly. He said family is about people who show up for each other, who choose to care even when it's difficult. Jake nodded approvingly. Smart man. Blood doesn't guarantee loyalty, and loyalty doesn't require shared DNA. Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of a truck pulling into the driveway. Jake frowned, glancing at the clock on the mantel. That's odd. Past 9 o'clock for social calls. Emma felt familiar anxiety spike through her system. Late-night visitors rarely brought good news in her experience. Jake seemed to sense her tension as he rose to answer the door. Stay here, he said quietly. Let me see who it is first. Emma heard voices on the front porch, Jake's calm bass tones contrasting with a higher, more agitated voice she didn't recognize. After several minutes, Jake returned with a middle-aged woman Emma had never seen before. She was well-dressed, but disheveled, with the kind of expensive handbag and perfect manicure that spoke of suburban affluence. Emma, Jake said carefully, this is Mrs. Patricia Davidson. She says you know each other. Emma's blood turned to ice. Mrs. Davidson was the wife of her former foster father, the woman who had consistently looked the other way when her husband's behavior became inappropriate. The woman who had chosen willful blindness over protecting a vulnerable teenager in her care. Emma, thank goodness, Mrs. Davidson said, moving toward Emma with apparent relief. When we realized you were missing, I was beside myself with worry. Richard said you'd probably just run off like troubled kids do, but I knew something terrible must have happened to make you leave without saying anything. Emma found her voice with difficulty. How did you find me? It took weeks of searching, Mrs. Davidson replied, settling uninvited into Jake's armchair. We hired a private investigator when the police said they couldn't dedicate resources to finding a 17-year-old who left voluntarily. The investigator tracked down reports of a young woman matching your description who had been seen with horses in this area. Jake's expression had grown increasingly cold as he listened to this explanation. You hired a private investigator to track down a minor who left your home? That seems like an unusual expense for foster parents. Mrs. Davidson's composure faltered slightly. Emma isn't just any foster child. She's been with us for over a year. We've grown quite attached to her. Attached enough to notice why she felt the need to leave in the middle of the night? Jake asked, his voice deceptively mild. Emma watched this exchange with growing dread. She could see the calculation in Mrs. Davidson's eyes, the careful consideration of how much to reveal and how much to conceal. Emma has had difficulties adjusting to family life, Mrs. Davidson said finally. She's been through multiple foster placements, and sometimes she gets overwhelmed by normal household expectations. We've been working with counselors to help her develop better coping strategies. The lies fell so smoothly from Mrs. Davidson's lips that Emma almost questioned her own memories. This was how it had always worked in the foster system, she realized. The adults controlled the narrative, shaped the story to protect themselves, while painting the children as the source of any problems. Is that so? Jake's tone had grown dangerously quiet. And these normal household expectations, what did they involve exactly? Mrs. Davidson's eyes darted between Jake and Emma, clearly sensing the hostile undercurrent in Jake's questions. I don't think it's appropriate to discuss Emma's personal issues in front of strangers. She needs professional help, not to be enabled in running away from her problems. Emma found herself standing without conscious decision, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. He's not a stranger. He's given me more genuine care and respect in 6 weeks than I received in over a year in your house. Emma, please, Mrs. Davidson said, rising as well with an expression of practiced patience. I understand you're upset, but we need to discuss this rationally. You're still a minor, and we have legal responsibility for your welfare. What welfare? Emma's voice rose despite her attempts to remain calm. You mean the welfare where your husband thought it was acceptable to come into my room at night? Where you pretended not to see the way he looked at me? The way he found excuses to touch me when you weren't around? Mrs. Davidson's face went pale, then flushed with anger. That's a very serious accusation, Emma. The kind of accusation that could ruin a good man's reputation based on nothing more than a troubled teenager's fantasies. Jake stepped forward, his entire demeanor radiating controlled fury. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to leave my property, now. You can't keep her here, Mrs. Davidson protested. She's a minor in state custody. Harboring a runaway is a criminal offense. And child abuse is a felony, Jake replied evenly. I'd be happy to discuss both topics with the appropriate authorities. Mrs. Davidson stared at him for a long moment, clearly recognizing that her preferred narrative was not being accepted. Emma, you have one chance to come home with me now and put this foolishness behind you. If you insist on staying here, there will be consequences for everyone involved. Emma felt the familiar terror of being trapped between impossible choices. But as she looked around Jake's warm living room, thought about the cabin that had become her sanctuary, and the horses who depended on her care, she realized something fundamental had changed. She was no longer the powerless, frightened girl who had fled into the night weeks ago. I'm not going back, Emma said clearly. This is my home now. Mrs. Davidson's expression hardened. We'll see about that. The authorities will be very interested to learn about this situation. After she left, Jake and Emma sat in silence for several minutes, both processing the implications of what had just occurred. Emma felt the fragile security she had built over the past weeks crumbling around her. I'm sorry, she whispered finally. I should have told you someone might come looking for me. Now, I've put you in legal jeopardy. Jake moved to sit beside her on the couch, his presence steady and reassuring. You have nothing to apologize for. That woman's husband abused you, and she enabled it by looking the other way. No child should have to endure that. But what if she follows through on her threats? What if they make you send me back? Jake was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. Emma, I want you to listen to me very carefully. You are not going back to that house. Whatever legal challenges we need to face, we'll face them together. Emma felt tears sliding down her cheeks, but for the first time in years, they were tears of relief rather than despair. Why are you willing to fight for me? You barely know me. Jake's smile was gentle but fierce. I know enough. I know you're brave, compassionate, and hardworking. I know you have a natural gift with animals and a mind eager to learn. I know you've survived things that would have broken many adults. And you've done it with your integrity intact. He paused, his voice growing softer. And I know that Margaret would have loved you like a daughter, which means you're already family as far as I'm concerned. Emma couldn't speak past the tightness in her throat, but she didn't need to. Jake understood her silence as acceptance of his protection and commitment to their unlikely but genuine family bond. "What happens now?" Emma asked when she could trust her voice again. "Now we prepare," Jake said practically. "I'll call my lawyer first thing in the morning, explain the situation, and find out what legal options we have. You're almost 18, which works in our favor. And if that woman's husband has been inappropriate with you, that changes everything about their legal standing." Emma nodded, feeling some of her anxiety ease under Jake's calm competence. This was what she had been missing her entire life, she realized. Not just protection, but the sense that someone competent and trustworthy was willing to stand between her and the world's dangers. "In the meantime," Jake continued, "nothing changes about our daily routine. The horses still need care, winter preparations still need to be completed, and you still have learning to do. Whatever comes, we'll handle it from a position of strength and purpose." That night, Emma lay in her bed in the little cabin, listening to the familiar sounds of the ranch settling into sleep around her. Through her window, she could see the barn where Thunder and Lightning were safely bedded down for the night, probably dreaming whatever dreams young horses dream. For the first time since Mrs. Davidson's unwelcome visit, Emma allowed herself to hope that the life she had built here might actually survive the challenge. She had Jake's support, meaningful work that gave her purpose, and a growing sense of her own capabilities and worth. Whatever battle lay ahead, she would face it not as the frightened, powerless girl who had once hidden in foster homes, but as someone who had found her strength in caring for others and building something meaningful with her own hands. The Foals had taught her something important about resilience. Despite losing their mother at birth, despite the trauma of those early days, they had thrived because they had been given proper care, consistent affection, and the security of knowing someone would always meet their needs. Emma realized she had found all of those things at Morrison Ranch. And like Thunder and Lightning, she was growing stronger every day, her trust expanding to match the love and security that surrounded her. Whatever Mrs. Davidson had planned, Emma was no longer the vulnerable child she had once been. She was part of a family now, the kind her grandfather had described, bound together not by blood but by choice, dedication, and the shared commitment to showing up for each other no matter what challenges arose. As sleep finally claimed her, Emma's last conscious thought was of the morning ahead, of Thunder and Lightning nickering their greeting as she entered the barn, of Jake's approving nod as she demonstrated some newly mastered skill. It was a future worth fighting for, and for the first time in her life, Emma knew she had allies who would fight alongside her. The lawyer's office in downtown Cedar Falls smelled of old leather and fresh coffee, its walls lined with legal volumes that seemed to represent decades of accumulated wisdom about human conflict and resolution. Emma sat rigidly in the chair beside Jake, her hands clasped tightly in her lap as she listened to Thomas Brennan explain their legal situation, with the careful precision of someone who had navigated similar battles many times before. "The good news is that you're 17, which gives us significantly more options than if you were younger," Brennan said, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses as he reviewed the documents spread across his mahogany desk. "Colorado law recognizes the right of minors to petition for emancipation under certain circumstances, and your situation appears to meet several of the criteria." Emma felt a flutter of hope in her chest. What does that mean exactly? "It means we can petition the court to legally recognize you as an adult before your 18th birthday," Brennan explained. "You'd need to demonstrate that you're financially self-sufficient, have stable housing, and can make mature decisions about your welfare. Based on what Jake has told me about your work at the ranch and your living situation, those requirements appear to be met." Jake leaned forward in his chair. "What about the Davidsons' claims? They're saying we're harboring a runaway." Brennan's expression grew more serious. "That's where things become complicated. They do have legal custody, which gives them certain rights. However, their position is significantly weakened by the abuse allegations. If Emma is willing to provide testimony about what occurred in their home, it changes the entire dynamic of the case." Emma felt her stomach clench with familiar anxiety. The thought of publicly detailing the uncomfortable encounters with Mr. Davidson, of having her word questioned and her credibility challenged, made her feel sick. "I know it's difficult," Brennan said gently, seeming to read her expression. There was something in his posture that reminded her of Thunder, the same careful balance between fear and defiance. "The colt you're looking for isn't here," Daniel said firmly. "And even if it was, you'd need to prove ownership before I'd turn over any animal." Crenshaw's expression darkened. Proof? He gestured toward the stable. How about I just take a look around and see what I can find? Might save us all some time and unpleasantness. How about you don't, Daniel replied. Like I said, this is private property. You want to search it? You'll need to come back with the sheriff and a warrant. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut. Rebecca could see that the confrontation was escalating beyond mere words, and she found herself desperately wishing for some way to help Daniel without exposing Emma to danger. It was at that moment that Thunder's agitation reached a crescendo. The traumatized horse had been growing increasingly distressed as the hostile voices grew louder, and now his fear manifested in a series of thunderous kicks against his stall door. The sound echoed through the stable like gunshots, causing several of the other horses to whinny and shift nervously. What the hell was that? Pike demanded, his hand moving to his weapon. Nervous horse, Daniel replied calmly, though Rebecca could see the tension in his shoulders. Doesn't like strangers. Crenshaw's eyes narrowed with interest. Nervous horse or guilty conscience. Maybe we should have that look around after all. Before Daniel could respond, Pike was striding toward the stable entrance, his intentions clear. Rebecca pressed herself and Emma deeper into the shadows, praying they wouldn't be discovered. But as Pike's silhouette appeared in the doorway, blocking much of the morning light, she realized they were trapped. The man's eyes scanned the interior of the stable, taking inventory of the horses and equipment. When his gaze reached the area where Rebecca and Emma were hiding, she held her breath, hoping the shadows would conceal them. But Emma, frightened by the strange man's presence and confused by her mother's obvious fear, chose that moment to make a small sound of distress. It was barely more than a whimper, but in the tense silence of the stable it might as well have been a shout. Pike's head snapped toward the sound, his eyes narrowing as he tried to locate its source. Well, he said slowly. When they arrived back at the ranch, Emma went immediately to check on Thunder and Lightning. The twins were now 5 months old, their gangly legs and awkward proportions giving way to the elegant lines that promised they would grow into magnificent horses. They greeted Emma with enthusiastic whinnies, pressing against the stall door in their eagerness for attention. Hello, beautiful boys, Emma murmured, stroking their necks and feeling some of her tension ease in their uncomplicated presence. How was your day? Thunder nuzzled her pocket, searching for the treats he had learned to expect, while Lightning contented himself with having his ears scratched. Their simple pleasure in her company reminded Emma of what truly mattered beyond the legal complications threatening to disrupt her peace. They're growing into fine horses, Jake observed, joining Emma at the stall. Strong, intelligent, well socialized. Their mother would be proud. Emma smiled at the thought. Do you think she would approve of how they've turned out? I think she'd be grateful, Jake replied. She died knowing her babies would need someone to love and protect them. You've done that and more. The conversation was interrupted by the sound of another vehicle approaching the ranch. Emma felt her anxiety spike immediately, memories of Mrs. Davidson's unwelcome visit still fresh in her mind. Expecting anyone? Jake asked, moving toward the front of the barn to get a better view of their visitor. Emma shook her head, following him with reluctant steps. Through the barn doorway, she could see a small sedan parked near the house, and a woman in a professional suit climbing out of the driver's seat. That's not Mrs. Davidson, Jake observed with relief. Looks official, though. The woman approached them with the confident stride of someone accustomed to conducting business in various settings. She was younger than Emma had expected, probably in her early 30s, with kind eyes behind stylish glasses. Mr. Morrison, Ms. Chen? She called out. I'm Amanda Rodriguez from Child Protective Services. I was hoping we could have a conversation. Emma's heart sank. This was it, she realized. The Davidsons had followed through on their threats, and now the state was here to drag her back to that house of hidden horrors. Jake stepped slightly forward, positioning himself between Emma and the social worker in a gesture of protection that didn't go unnoticed. What can we do for you, Ms. Rodriguez? Jake asked politely, but warily. I'd like to discuss Emma's current living situation, Rodriguez replied. May we speak privately? They gathered in Jake's kitchen, where Rodriguez declined, offered coffee, and instead pulled out a tablet and several official-looking documents. Emma sat stiffly in her chair, prepared for the worst. "First, let me clarify why I'm here," Rodriguez began. "We received a complaint from the Davidson family claiming that Emma is being held against her will at this location. However, our investigation has revealed some concerning information about the Davidson household that prompted us to take a different approach to this case." Emma blinked in surprise. This wasn't the conversation she had been expecting. Rodriguez continued, "We've discovered that the Davidsons have had an unusually high number of placement disruptions over the years. When combined with Emma's allegations of inappropriate behavior, it raised enough red flags to warrant a thorough review of their foster care license." Jake leaned forward with interest. "What kind of review?" "As of yesterday, the Davidsons' license has been suspended pending a full investigation," Rodriguez explained. "They are no longer authorized to provide foster care, which means their legal custody of Emma has been terminated." Emma stared at the social worker in disbelief. "Does that mean I'm free?" "It means you're no longer under their legal authority," Rodriguez confirmed. "However, as a minor, you still need some form of legal guardianship until you turn 18 or become emancipated." Emma felt her brief moment of hope deflating. "So I'll be placed with another foster family?" Rodriguez smiled for the first time since arriving. "Not necessarily. Given your age and the stability of your current situation, we have other options. Mr. Morrison, would you be interested in pursuing temporary guardianship of Emma until her emancipation proceedings are completed?" Jake's face lit up with surprise and pleasure. "Are you serious?" "Completely serious," Rodriguez replied. "Emma is clearly thriving in this environment. She has stable housing, meaningful work, and a supportive guardian figure. From our perspective, disrupting this arrangement would serve no one's best interests." Emma felt tears of relief threatening to overflow. "You mean I can stay here legally?" "With Mr. Morrison's consent and after completing the appropriate paperwork, yes," Rodriguez confirmed. "The temporary guardianship would give him legal authority to make decisions about your welfare, while protecting both of you from any future challenges from the Davidsons or other parties." Jake reached over and squeezed Emma's hand gently. "I'd be honored to be your legal guardian, if that's what you want." Emma couldn't speak past the emotion clogging her throat, so she simply nodded vigorously while tears of joy streamed down her cheeks. The paperwork took several hours to complete, but by evening, Emma's legal status had been fundamentally transformed. She was no longer a runaway hiding from an abusive situation. She was a young woman with a legitimate guardian who cared about her welfare and supported her goals. That night, as they sat by the fireplace celebrating this unexpected victory, Jake raised his coffee mug in a toast. "To family," he said simply. "The kind we choose and the kind that chooses us." Emma clinked her hot chocolate against his mug. "To family," she agreed. "And to second chances." As winter deepened into its harshest months, Emma's life settled into a rhythm of contentment she had never experienced before. The legal resolution had removed the sword of Damocles that had been hanging over her happiness, allowing her to fully invest in her relationships and her future. Thunder and Lightning continued to grow and develop under her devoted care. They were now confident, well-trained yearlings who responded to Emma's voice and followed her around the pasture like oversized puppies. Jake had begun discussing plans for their eventual training as riding horses, recognizing that their early socialization with Emma had given them ideal temperaments for human partnership. "They're going to make exceptional horses," Jake observed one afternoon as they watched the twins playing in the snow-covered paddock. "Intelligent, athletic, and completely trustful of humans. That's a rare combination." Emma felt pride swell in her chest as she watched her former charges racing through the powder, their joy infectious and pure. "They've taught me as much as I've taught them," she replied. "About resilience, about trust, about what it means to care for someone completely." Jake nodded approvingly. The best teachers often come in unexpected forms. As Emma's 18th birthday approached in late February, Jake surprised her with an announcement that would change both of their futures in ways neither had anticipated. "I've been thinking about the ranch's future," Jake said one evening over dinner. "About what happens when I'm too old to handle all the physical demands of horse breeding and training." Emma looked up from her meal with concern. "You're not that old, Jake. You've got years of good work left in you. Jake smiled at her worry. I appreciate your confidence, but I'm 58 years old. In this business, that means I need to start planning for succession if I want to ensure the ranch continues operating successfully. Emma felt a flutter of anxiety. Are you thinking about selling? Actually, I'm thinking about partnership, Jake replied. You've proven yourself to be not just competent, but exceptional at every aspect of ranch management. You understand the horses, you've mastered the business side of the operation, and you have the kind of natural instincts that can't be taught. Emma stared at him in surprise. What are you saying? Jake pulled out a folder from the desk behind him and placed it on the table between them. I'm saying I'd like to offer you a partnership in Morrison Ranch. Equal ownership, shared decision-making, and a future that belongs to both of us. Emma opened the folder with trembling hands, seeing legal documents that would make her a co-owner of the property she had come to love more than anywhere else on earth. I can't accept this, she whispered. It's too much. You've already given me everything. Jake reached across the table and covered her hands with his own. Emma, you've brought life back to this place in ways I never expected. You've taken a lonely old man's ranch and turned it into a home again. This isn't charity. It's recognition of what you've already contributed, and an investment in what we can build together. Emma felt tears sliding down her cheeks as she looked around the kitchen that had become the heart of her world. Are you sure? Once we do this, there's no going back. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Jake replied firmly. You are the daughter Margaret and I always hoped for, and this ranch is your inheritance as much as it would have been any biological child's. Emma threw her arms around Jake's neck, holding him tight as she finally allowed herself to believe that this miraculous second chance at family was real and permanent. Yes, she whispered against his shoulder. Yes, I want to be your partner. I want to build this future with you. On Emma's 18th birthday, they celebrated not just her legal adulthood, but the official partnership that would govern their shared future. The signing ceremony was simple, conducted in the same lawyer's office where they had fought for Emma's freedom months earlier, but the significance was profound. Congratulations, Thomas Brennan said as he notarized the final documents. You're now equal partners in one of the most respected horse operations in the state. Emma looked at Jake, seeing pride and affection shining in his eyes. Partners, she repeated, testing the word and finding it perfect. As spring arrived and brought new life to the ranch, Emma and Jake began implementing plans they had developed throughout the winter. They expanded their breeding program, invested in upgraded facilities, and started offering training services to other horse owners in the region. Thunder and Lightning, now magnificent 2-year-olds, became the cornerstones of their riding program. Their exceptional temperaments and athletic ability made them perfect ambassadors for the ranch's training philosophy, demonstrating that horses raised with patience and respect could achieve remarkable levels of cooperation and trust. Look at them, Emma said one morning as she watched the twins working with a group of young riders, their gentle nature making them ideal teachers for children learning to ride. They're giving other kids the same gift they gave me, the chance to discover their own strength and capability. Jake nodded, understanding the deeper meaning behind her observation. The best healing happens when we find ways to help others heal too. As Emma stood in the pasture she now owned as much as Jake did, surrounded by horses that trusted her completely and filled with purpose that gave meaning to every day, she marveled at the journey that had brought her to this moment. She had arrived at Morrison Ranch as a desperate runaway, hiding in a barn with 2 orphaned foals and no hope for a future beyond mere survival. Now she was a confident businesswoman, a skilled horsewoman, and most importantly, a beloved daughter who had found her place in the world through the simple act of caring for creatures who needed her protection. Thunder and Lightning approached her as she stood lost in reflection, their now massive heads nuzzling her shoulders with the same trust they had shown as frightened babies. They had grown into everything their bloodlines had promised, but more than that, they had retained the gentle spirits that had first endeared them to Emma during those desperate early days. We did it, Emma whispered to them, stroking their necks and feeling the solid warmth of their acceptance. We all found our way home. The ranch spread around them in the golden light of late afternoon, alive with the sounds of horses calling to each other across the pastures, and the satisfied bustle of a working operation in its prime. Emma had helped build all of this, had earned her place here through dedication, skill, and the willingness to love completely despite the risks involved. Jake appeared beside her as he so often did, his presence a constant source of strength and wisdom in her life. "Any regrets?" he asked quietly, his eyes taking in the empire they had built together. Emma considered the question seriously, thinking about the path that had led her here through foster homes and abuse, through fear and desperation, through the discovery that family could be chosen rather than simply endured. "None," she said finally, her voice carrying the absolute certainty of someone who had found their true purpose. "This is exactly where I'm supposed to be." As the sun set behind the mountains that framed their valley, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Emma knew that her story was far from over. There would be new challenges, new horses to train, new lives to touch through the work they did together. But whatever came next, she would face it from a position of strength, surrounded by the family she had chosen and the purpose she had discovered in caring for the creatures who depended on her love. The frightened girl who had once hidden in a hayloft with twin foals was gone, replaced by a woman who knew her own worth and had found her place in the world through the simple but profound act of choosing love over fear, again and again, until it became as natural as breathing. Thunder whinnied softly as if sensing her thoughts, and Emma smiled as she remembered Jake's words from that first night, "Stay, if they're gentle like Mama." She had stayed, and in staying she had discovered that gentleness could be its own form of strength, and that the greatest victories came not from fighting the world, but from creating spaces where love could flourish and grow. 5 years later, Emma stood at the edge of the main pasture watching a group of children from the local riding program work with thunder and lightning. The twins, now magnificent 7-year-olds, moved with the patience of seasoned teachers as they guided nervous beginners through their first riding lessons. "Miss Emma," called out 10-year-old Sarah Martinez, a shy girl who had been attending the program for 3 months. "Thunder keeps stopping when I ask him to trot. Am I doing something wrong?" Emma smiled, walking over to adjust Sarah's posture in the saddle. "He's not ignoring you, sweetheart. He's making sure you're balanced and ready before he goes faster. Thunder was an orphan too, so he understands what it feels like to need extra care and patience." Sarah's eyes widened with understanding. "Really? But he's so big and strong now." "The strongest horses are often the ones who learned early that gentleness matters more than power," Emma explained, watching as Thunder turned his head to nuzzle Sarah's boot with affection. Jake approached from the barn, carrying feed buckets for the evening routine. At 63, he moved with the careful efficiency of someone who had learned to work smarter rather than harder, but his eyes still held the same warmth that had first convinced Emma to trust him all those years ago. "How are our students doing today?" he asked, setting down the buckets to watch the lesson. "They're learning that horses mirror what we bring to them," Emma replied. "Fear creates fear, but confidence and kindness create partnership." Jake nodded approvingly. "Smart horses. Smarter teacher." The riding program had been Emma's idea, born from her desire to give other children the same healing connection with horses that had transformed her own life. What had started as weekend lessons for a few local kids had grown into a recognized therapeutic program that drew families from 3 counties. Mrs. Morrison called out David Chen, Sarah's father, as he approached from the parking area. "Could I speak with you for a moment?" Emma felt the familiar warmth that still surprised her when people used her married name. She and Jake had formalized their father-daughter relationship through legal adoption 2 years earlier, making official what had always been true in their hearts. "Sarah's doing wonderfully," David continued. "But I wanted to ask about the summer camp program you mentioned. Would there be space for her?" Emma consulted the tablet she now carried everywhere, filled with schedules and student information. "We have 1 spot left in the July session. Sarah would be perfect for it." As David filled out the registration forms, Emma reflected on how naturally her life had evolved, from caring for 2 orphan foals to building a program that helped dozens of children each year discover their own strength and capability. The summer camp had become Morrison Ranch's signature program, a 2-week intensive where children learned not just riding skills but also responsibility, empathy, and confidence through caring for the horses. Many of the participants returned year after year, forming lasting bonds with both the animals and the life lessons they represented. "Emma," Jake called from near the barn. "We've got visitors." Emma looked up to see a familiar car pulling into the driveway. Dr. Amanda Rodriguez, the social worker who had helped secure Emma's guardianship, stepped out with a woman Emma didn't recognize. "Amanda," Emma called out, genuinely pleased to see her former caseworker. "What brings you out here?" "I wanted to show my colleague what success looks like," Amanda replied, gesturing to the woman beside her. "This is Dr. Lisa Harper. She's researching innovative approaches to youth development, and I told her she had to see Morrison Ranch." Dr. Harper looked around with obvious interest, taking in the well-maintained facilities, the calm interactions between children and horses, and the atmosphere of purposeful activity that characterized the ranch. "This is impressive," Dr. Harper said. "How many young people do you work with annually?" "About 200 through various programs," Emma replied. "Some come for weekly lessons, others for summer camps, and we have a scholarship program for kids from challenging backgrounds." "Like you were," Amanda added gently. Emma nodded without embarrassment. "Exactly like I was. These horses gave me a reason to believe in myself when nothing else could. Every child deserves that same opportunity." Dr. Harper spent the next hour touring the facilities, interviewing staff, and observing the riding lessons. Emma could see her taking mental notes, clearly impressed by the program's scope and effectiveness. "What would you say is the key to your success?" Dr. Harper asked as they concluded the tour. Emma considered the question carefully. "We don't try to fix broken children," she said finally. "We create safe spaces where they can discover they were never broken to begin with. The horses teach them that trust is possible, that gentleness has power, and that healing happens through connection rather than isolation." Jake joined them as they stood watching Thunder and Lightning being led back to their stalls after the day's lessons. Both horses moved with the confident ease of animals who knew their worth and purpose. "Those two started it all," Jake explained to Dr. Harper. "Emma saved their lives, and in return, they gave her a reason to believe in the future. And now they're helping save other lives," Dr. Harper observed. "It's a beautiful circle." Emma felt emotion tighten her throat as she thought about the journey that had brought them all to this moment. "The best healing happens when we find ways to help others heal too," she said, echoing words Jake had spoken years earlier. As the visitors prepared to leave, Dr. Harper handed Emma a business card. "I'd like to feature Morrison Ranch in my research," she said. "Programs like yours are exactly what we need more of in this world." After the visitors left, Emma and Jake completed the evening feeding routine in comfortable partnership. The horses nickered their greetings as they approached each stall, their contentment evident in every relaxed posture. "Proud of what we've built," Jake said quietly as they finished their work. Emma looked around at the ranch that had become so much more than either of them had originally envisioned. "We've built something that matters," she agreed. "Something that will outlast both of us." As they walked back toward the house, Emma's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it and smiled. "What is it?" Jake asked, noticing her expression. "Sarah Martinez's mother," Emma replied. "She says Sarah hasn't stopped talking about Thunder since her lesson today. She wants to sign up for the advanced program next month." Jake chuckled. "Another convert to the Thunder and Lightning fan club." Emma laughed, remembering her own first encounter with the twin foals who had changed everything. They're still working their magic, even after all these years. That night, as Emma sat on her porch looking out over the pastures where horses grazed peacefully in the moonlight, she thought about the scared 17-year-old who had once hidden in a hayloft with 2 newborn foals. That girl could never have imagined the life that awaited her, the family she would find, or the countless other lives she would touch through her work. Thunder and Lightning stood together near the fence, their white markings visible even in the darkness. They had grown from helpless orphans into magnificent horses, who served as living proof that with proper care, patience, and love, even the most vulnerable creatures could thrive. Emma's phone buzzed again with another message. this time from a parent inquiring about the spring riding program. She smiled as she responded, scheduling another intake appointment for next week. Tomorrow would bring new children, new challenges, and new opportunities to witness the transformative power of connection between humans and horses. The ranch was quiet now, except for the gentle sounds of animals settling for the night and the whisper of wind through the trees Jake had planted around the property. Emma felt the deep satisfaction that came from knowing she had found her true calling, her real family, and her permanent home. Rising from her chair, she took one last look at the pastures where thunder and lightning stood guard over their domain. "Thank you," she whispered to them, to Jake, to the grandfather whose early lessons had prepared her for this life, and to the universe that had somehow guided her from desperation to purpose. Inside the house, Jake was already asleep in his recliner, a book about advanced horse training techniques open across his chest. Emma covered him with a blanket and turned off the lights, leaving him to dream whatever dreams came to those who had spent their lives in service to others. As she headed to her own room, Emma passed the wall where Jake had hung photos chronicling their years together. There was the first picture of Thunder and Lightning as foals, Emma barely visible in the background. There were graduation photos from the various training programs she had completed, images from horse shows they had won, and candid shots of children learning to ride under her guidance. The final photo in the sequence showed Emma at her college graduation ceremony the previous spring, Jake beaming with pride beside her as she accepted her degree in equine science. She had completed her education through part-time study while continuing to run the ranch, proving to herself that it was never too late to pursue dreams that mattered. Emma smiled at the progression the photos represented, the visual story of a girl who had found her strength through caring for others and had built a life of meaning and purpose from the ashes of a traumatic past. Tomorrow would bring new adventures, new children to teach, new horses to train, and new opportunities to prove that healing was always possible when approached with patience, wisdom, and love. Emma fell asleep, planning lessons and dreaming of futures yet to unfold, secure in the knowledge that she had finally found the place where she truly belonged. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.